Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the History of Scotland, episode 55 The Warrior and Knight. In our previous episode, we ventured into the tumultuous early reign of William I's son and heir, Alexander II. We traversed the upheavals of his ascension to the throne in 1214 AD, delved into his involvement in the Barons' Revolt in England, and witnessed his firm response to the insurgencies in Moray that challenged his authority. Alexander II, often overshadowed by the saintly legacy of his uncle Malcolm IV, has proven to be a cut from a different cloth, embodying the martial spirit of his father, William the Lion. Today we will continue to explore the middle years of Alexander's rule, a period marked not only by internal consolidation but also by his aspirations to extend his influence beyond Scotland's traditional borders. As we've seen, Alexander's reign was anything but tranquil. His aspirations to fortify his rule and expand his territories often led him into conflicts that tested his resolve and strategic acumen. Today's journey through history will reveal more about these ambitious endeavours, the personal sorrows that shadow his triumphs, and the battles waged against the looming influence of the Kingdom of Norway. Our story resumes in the year 1221, a time when Scotland was still stitching itself together from the fabric of feudal loyalties and regional allegiances. Alexander, young and driven, was not content to sit idle while opportunities to fortify his kingdom presented themselves. His actions during this period laid the groundwork for what would become defining moments of his reign. But as we'll see, not all was to be victories and expansions. Tragedy too would find its way to Alexander's door. What would happen? Well, there's only one way to delve into these questions and unravel the fabric of Alexander II's kingship. How did he navigate the complex web of feudal loyalties and regional power bases? How did he deal with the death in his family? As we explore these poignant chapters of Scottish history, remember that the past is not merely a series of events but a mosaic of human experiences, ambitions and heartbreaks. Each decision and battle not only shaped Alexander's reign but also the very fabric of Scotland itself. So, as always, grab yourself a hot drink, turn up the volume on your radio or headphones, and let's travel back to the bustling courts and battle-scarred landscapes of Alexander II's Scotland. Whether at home or on the go, join me as we discover whether Alexander II's audacious efforts to expand his kingdom were met with triumph or despair. And as always, we're not just recounting history, we're stepping into the lives of those who lived it. Let's find out together how Alexander II's tale unfolds further. In the tumultuous tapestry of Scottish history, the Orkney Islands often weave a narrative that intertwines Norse and Scottish legacies. In 1222 AD, a particularly stark and fiery chapter was etched into the narrative, featuring John Haraldson, the last native Scandinavian to hold the title of Jarl of Orkney. His tenure as Jarl was marked by the complex interplay of loyalty and power in the region, still under the considerable influence of the Kingdom of Norway. John Haraldson ascended to this influential position amidst the shifting allegiances of the early 13th century. The Jarl of Orkney was not merely a regional leader, but a pivotal figure in maintaining the balance between Norse traditions and the encroaching interests of the Scottish crown. Haraldson's role was crucial in navigating these waters, striving to uphold his Norse heritage whilst contending with the growing power of the Scottish monarchy. The year 1222 also witnessed a grievous incident that would mar Haraldson's rule: the burning of Adam of Melrose, a bishop whose death at Haraldsson's hall at Hallkirk, Caithness, ignited controversy and conflict. The event was not just a personal tragedy, but a spark that threatened to inflame the relations between Norse and Scottish authorities. But why was John Haraldsson implicated in such a dire affair? It appears that local tensions, perhaps stoked by disputes over authority and territory, led to this tragic outcome. Although Haraldson was not directly accused of orchestrating the bishop's murder, his position as Jarl implicated him in the eyes of many, as he was responsible for maintaining order in his realm. The burning of a high ecclesiastical figure at his own hall suggested either complicity or a grievous lack of control, both equally damaging in a period where the church wielded significant moral and political autonomy. The reaction to Adam's death was as fiery as the event itself. The local community, ensnared in the ensuing chaos, was split. Some saw the bishop's death as a martyrdom, a stark illustration of the dangers posed by Norse rule, while others perhaps viewed it as an unfortunate consequence of the ongoing struggles between different power factions in the region. Meanwhile, the Norwegian authorities, still holding sway over Orkney and Caithness at this time, were placed in a precarious position. The incident offered an opportunity for the Scottish crown to assert more direct influence over the region, challenging Norwegian control. The Norse response was necessarily cautious, aimed at quelling further unrest while assessing the loyalty and effectiveness of their appointed Jarl. Let's now detail this event more extensively, using the research from some of the articles I've been reading on this matter. The tragedy at Holkirk unfolded within the walls of John Haraldsson's hall, a significant location symbolising Norse authority in Caithness. Bishop Adam of Melrose, who was well respected in ecclesiastical circles, had arrived at the hall under circumstances that suggested routine diplomatic and administrative dealings. However, the undying and unyielding tensions between the Norse rulers and the local Scottish communities were about to ignite in the most literal sense. As tensions escalated, fueled by disputes over land, tribute and judicial authority, meeting turned hostile. The exact spark that led to the, conflagration remains unclear, lost to history whispers. What is known is that the hall was set ablaze, and Adam of Melrose perished in the fire, a grim spectacle that suggested a targeted attack rather than a mere accident. This act was perceived not just as a personal assault against the bishop, but as a broader challenge to stability and authority imposed by the Norse governance. The aftermath of the fire was swift and damning for John Haraldsson. Although no direct evidence implicated him in orchestrating the attack, the fact that such a violent act could occur under his roof was a severe blow to his credibility and authority. The incident cast him in a suspicious light both among his subjects and his Norwegian superiors. Questions arose about his competence and loyalty, with whispers of his possible involvement, or at the very least his failure to protect a high-ranking church official. This erosion of trust was a critical blow to Haraldsson's rule, leading to increased scrutiny and reduced influence within the Norse political structure. His ability to govern was called into question, weakening his position and emboldening both local and external adversaries. For our Alexander II, the turmoil in Orkney presented a strategic opportunity. The burning of Adam of Melrose served as a catalyst for Alexander to assert more direct control over the northern territories, which were still under nominal Norse dominion. He positioned himself as a stabilising force, promising to restore order and protect ecclesiastical interests, contrasting starkly against a perceived Norse failure. The incident thus played directly into the ongoing power dynamics between Norway and Scotland. It accelerated Scottish interventions in Norse-held territories and justified Alexander's ambitions to expand his influence into these areas. The weakening of Norse authority in Orkney and Caithness following the tragedy signalled a shift towards greater Scottish control, setting the stage for further military and diplomatic manoeuvres by Alexander. Following the tragic and chaotic events of 1222 in Holkirk, Alexander was not only swift in his response, but marked by a severity that underscored his resolve to establish control and assert his authority. Alexander targeted the local farmers of Caithness, whom he held responsible for the atrocity. His response was multifaceted. and harsh, aimed at both punishing the people responsible and deterring future rebellions. Historical records suggest that Alexander ordered the execution of several farmers, implementing a punitive measure that included hangings as a stark warning to any dissenters. Additionally, there are accounts of mutilations, which served as a grim reminder of the king's reach and the consequences of challenging his authority. These actions were not just merely about retribution, they were a calculated display of power. Alexander aimed to reaffirm his control over the northern territories and solidify his position both as a sovereign and a protector of the church. By meting out such a severe punishment, he sent a clear message across his kingdom that disturbances to the peace and threats to clerical members would be met with the utmost severity. The severity of Alexander's actions might have sparked controversy under different circumstances, but he received notable support from the highest ecclesiastical authority of the time, the papacy. Pope Irenaeus III, who was a pope from 1216 to 1227, played a pivotal role during this period. His response to the events in Falkirk was crucial. He openly commended Alexander's actions. The papal approval can be attributed to the pope's interest in ensuring that the church in England and the church in Scotland remained under strong and protective leadership, especially following the violent death of a bishop. Later, Pope Clemenstein IV, who assumed the papacy in 1241, also echoed this support. The commendation from Clemenstein, although coming years after the incident, was a reinforcement of the Vatican's approval of Alexander's governance, especially in terms of protecting the church's interests and clergy. Such endorsements were significant, as they not only justified Alexander's harsh measures, but also aligned him more closely with the church, bolstering his legitimacy and moral standing among his subjects and beyond. The backing from both popes was not merely symbolic, it had profound practical implication for Alexander's authority and his policy decisions. The support from the papacy provided Alexander with a potent form of legitimacy, especially in a medieval Europe where the church wielded substantial influence over both secular rulers and the general populace. With a papal endorsement, Alexander's actions were not only seen as necessary for maintaining order, but also as divinely sanctioned. This significantly bolstered his standing among the nobility and clergy within his realm, who were often the critical power brokers and influencers of the medieval political landscape. But Alexander's decision to take decisive action in response to the events in Orkney was also a calculated move to assert his sovereignty over a strategically important region. Orkney at the time represented a critical point of influence due to its location between Scotland and Norway. For Alexander, asserting this control over Orkney was crucial for several reasons. Orkney could serve as a gateway for Norwegian influence to enter Scotland, or conversely as a springboard for Scottish influence and ambitions in the North Sea. Controlling Orkney meant securing Scotland's northern frontier against potential Norwegian incursions or rebellions orchestrated from across the sea. Orkney was a vital hub for maritime trade and a source of maritime resources. Asserting control over the islands would allow Alexander to benefit from these economic activities, increasing his realm's wealth and his capacity to fund further military and domestic initiatives. By integrating Orkney more fully into the Kingdom of Scotland, Alexander aimed to diminish the Norse control autonomy of the islands, promoting greater loyalty to the Scottish crown and reducing the likelihood of Norse-instigated resistance or rebellion. Alexander II's reign is marked not only by his response to high-profile events, but also his strategic efforts to consolidate control over Scotland's more rebellious regions, this time in Argyll and Galloway. Argyll, located on the western coast of Scotland, was historically a region with strong maritime culture, heavily influenced by both Norse and Gaelic traditions. During Alexander's reign in the early 13th century, Argyll was primarily under the control of local Gaelic clans, notably the MacDouglas clan and the MacDonalds, descendants of Somerled, our favourite revolt leader who invaded Scotland with a mass of naval ships, but he was defeated by the forces of Malcolm IV. Remember, Somerled held significant power and autonomy in these regions. The region was also a strategic maritime importance, serving as a gateway to the Hebrides, which were under varying degrees of Norse influence. Alexander employed a combination of military might and strategic marriages to assert his authority over Argyll. His approach included leading several military expeditions to demonstrate his power and directly confront any local resistance. These campaigns were typically swift and aimed at overwhelming the local lords before they could consolidate a unified resistance. To ensure ongoing control, Alexander initiated the construction of castles, fortifications and boroughs. These not only served as military strongholds, but also as a symbol of royal authority and administrative centres to oversee local governance. Understanding the importance of local allegiances, Alexander sought marriages between his loyalists and key figures within the Argyll clans. These marriages were meant to create bonds of loyalty and mutual interest that would integrate the local nobility into the broader Scottish political sphere. By securing the western seaboard, Argyll's location made it a key defensive frontier against external threats, particularly from the Norse-dominated Hebrides and beyond. Control of Argyll allowed Alexander to secure Scotland's western maritime borders. But Argyll was not only strategically important, but was also rich in resources, including timber and access to fishing grounds. Securing Argyll meant better control over these economic resources, which were vital for the kingdom's prosperity. But by integrating Argyll more firmly into the realm of the Scottish crown, Alexander aimed to diminish regional autonomy that could challenge his authority. This was part of a broader effort to centralise the governance all the way back from David I and, yes, the Davidonian Revolution. Alexander's efforts in Argyll reflect his broader strategies to consolidate Scotland under a central authority, reinforcing his control through a blend of force, fortification and familial ties. These actions, while often harsh, were often deemed necessary to unify a kingdom characterised by diverse and sometimes fractious regional identities. With his actions in Argyll, Galloway rose up in defiance of Alexander II's actions. The challenge posed by Galloway was a significant concern for Alexander during his reign. This southwestern region of Scotland, known for its fierce independence and distinct cultural identity, has been historically a thorny issue for our past Scottish monarchs. This revolt was nothing different. Alexander's approach to quelling the revolt in Galloway combined both military intervention and strategic governance. He acted quickly to suppress the rebellion by dispatching a formidable military force to Galloway. This rapid deployment was crucial in demonstrating the Crown's ability and willingness to assert control. The swift and decisive nature of this military action helped minimise prolonged conflict and demonstrated the futility of resistance against the central government. Following the initial military suppression, Alexander employed a strategy of pacification that included installing loyal administrators who could oversee the region more effectively. These officials were tasked with maintaining order and ensuring that the Crown's laws and taxes were enforced, which was vital for integrating Galloway more closely into the Kingdom of Scotland. Galloway was an important area that cannot be overstated. It had a buffer zone. It served as a buffer between the Scottish and English border in some areas. It had massive economic contributions to the crown. Cultural integration of these Gaelic people into this more Normanised kingdom was also crucial. Through these measures, Alexander managed not only to suppress the revolt in Galloway, also lay the foundations for its longer-term integration into the Scottish kingdom. This approach reflected his broader strategy of centralising power and mitigating regional dissent, crucial for the stability and unity of his realm. Now, after his dealings in Galloway, England decided to rear its head once more. The King of England was Henry III, Henry III ascended to the throne at a very young age after the death of his father, King John, in 1216. Henry's long reign, which lasted until 1272, was marked by various challenges, including internal baronial conflicts and the need to restore and maintain royal authority after the disruptions of his father's reign. Following the suppression of the revolt in Galloway around 1235 AD, the dynamics between Scotland and England took a pivotal turn. This period saw an integrated interplay of demands and diplomatic manoeuvres between Alexander and Henry, which culminated in significant treaties affecting both kingdoms. In the wake of the Galloway revolt, Henry III of England saw an opportunity to assert his influence over Scotland. He demanded homage from Alexander for the lands he held in England. Alexander's holdings in England were substantial enough that such homage was not unusual. However, Alexander used this demand as leverage to further his own ambitions towards the northern English counties. In response, Alexander made a counterclaim for territories in northern England, an area, as we know, with historical claims dating back to his uncle's reign. This exchange of claims was not just about territorial rights, but also about asserting sovereignty and testing the limits of each monarch's influence over the other. The tensions and negotiations led to the Treaty of York in 1237 AD, a crucial diplomatic agreement between Henry III and Alexander II. This treaty was significant for several reasons. The Treaty of York clearly defined the Anglo-Scottish border from the Solway Firth to the River Tweed. This largely remains the border to this day. By setting clear boundaries, the treaty helped minimise the areas of direct conflict and potential disputes between the two nations. By agreeing to the terms of the Treaty of York, both monarchs aimed to reduce the ongoing hostilities and frequent border skirmishes that had plagued the Anglo-Scottish relations. This was a step towards a more stable and peaceful interaction, although future conflicts were by no means entirely prevented. Edward I and his invasion. The treaty also involved mutual recognition of each other's monarch sovereignty over their respective realms. Alexander acknowledged Henry's authority over the disputed northern English counties, while Henry recognised Alexander's sovereignty over Scotland, without further demands for homage beyond the agreed terms. The Treaty of York had a long-lasting impact on Anglo-Scottish relations during Alexander's reign and beyond. It established a precedent for diplomatic resolution of disputes rather than military confrontation, suggesting a mature way of dealing with political interaction between Scotland and England. The treaty also secured a period of relative peace, which allowed Alexander to focus on internal matters such as consolidating his control further in the Scottish Highlands and dealing with internal dissent. The treaty stabilised the border areas, which benefited both kingdoms in terms of trade and security. In essence, the Treaty of York was a foundational element in the relationship between Scotland and England during the 13th century. It represented a diplomatic victory for both Alexander and Henry, allowing each to secure their borders while maintaining their dignity and sovereignty. Alexander II has conquered everything so far in this episode, but something he could not conquer was death itself. The life and untimely death of Joan, the first wife of Alexander, brings a touch of mystery and tragedy to the story of his reign. Her death in March 1238 marked a significant moment influencing the personal and political dynamics of Alexander's rule. As we know, Joan of England was born in 1210 and was the daughter of King John of England and his queen Isabella. For her marriage, Joan was a significant figure due to her connections to the English crown, which made her a valuable political ally in the eyes of other monarchs, including Scotland. As we know in the last episode, Alexander married Joan as part of an agreement between John and Alexander II. Their marriage, while politically adventurous, faced challenges from the outset. The couple had no children, a significant concern given the importance of securing a royal heir. The lack of offspring led to discussions about the possibility of annulment. However, such a move was deemed too risky, as it could potentially provoke a military response from England, jeopardising the fragile peace between the two nations. At the Scottish court, Joan's position was somewhat undermined by the presence of her mother-in-law, the Queen Dowager Irmgard, who held substantial influence over her son Alexander II. Despite these challenges, Joan's English connections continued to make her a politically important figure. Her presence alongside Alexander in England in September 1236 at Newcastle and in September 1237 at York during the negotiations with her brother King Henry III over disputed territories and the Treaty of York underscores her ongoing role in these critical diplomatic interactions. During these years, chronicler Matthew Paris noted that Joan and Alexander's relationship had grown estranged. Joan expressed a desire to spend more time in England, a preference that was supported by her brother, who granted her manors in Yorkshire and further south in England. This arrangement allowed her some independence and a retreat from the Scottish court. It was also in York where Joan and her sister-in-law, Eleanor of Provence, agreed to make a pilgrimage to Thomas Becket's shrine in Canterbury, highlighting her continued engagement with her native country's political and religious life. The death of Joan was not only a personal loss for the king, but also a significant political event with far-reaching consequences. Joan died on March the 4th, 1238, at Haverington Bower in Essex, a royal residence close to London. The event was poignant as she died in the arms of her brothers, King Henry III of England and Richard of Cornwall, reflecting her close ties to the English royal family. The circumstances of her death, while not fully detailed in historical records, did not suggest foul play. Rather, it appears to have been an unexpected natural death. Her body was later transported and buried at Tarrant Crawford Abbey in Dorset, fulfilling her last wishes. This location was chosen perhaps because of its tranquility and the personal significance it may have held for her as a peaceful final resting place away from the political tumult of her married life. On a personal level, Joan's death deeply affected Alexander. Despite the political nature of their marriage and the challenges that came with it, the loss of a spouse is a profound personal tragedy. The fact that the marriage had not produced any heirs added a layer of complexity to Alexander's grief, mingling personal loss with political anxiety. The transition from the tragic death of Queen Joan to Alexander II's remarriage was not merely a matter of personal recovery, but a strategic manoeuvre critical for the Scottish monarchy's stability and future. In 1239, 12 years after Joan's death, Alexander married Marie de Courcy, marking a pivotal moment in his reign, especially following the birth of their son, the future Alexander III, in 1241. Marie de Courcy, the daughter of Lord of Courcy, brought considerable political and social advantages to her marriage with Alexander. The Lord of Courcy was a powerful French noble known for his expansive estates and influence in the Picardy region. This alliance was carefully chosen to strengthen Scotland's ties with the powerful continental force of France, particularly at a time when English authority on the continent was diminishing after the loss of Normandy. The marriage was orchestrated under the guidance and political necessity and mutual benefit. Alexander needed a viable heir, and aligning with one of the French's most influential families bolstered Scotland's position in European politics. The wedding, a grand affair, symbolised not only a union of two hearts, but also a strategic alliance that promised military and diplomatic support crucial for Alexander's reign and Scotland's security. While the intimate details of Alexander and Marie's marriage remain largely undocumented, the functional aspects of their union suggest a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. The birth of their son, Alexander III, within 2 years of their marriage, was a testament to the marriage's success, at least in terms of producing an heir. This quick succession might imply a stable, if not affectionate, relationship, fulfilling the primary objective of any royal marriage during this period, securing the dynastic lineage. The necessity for Alexander II to remarry after Joan's untimely demise was multifaceted. He needed the dynastic security, the reinforcement of international ties, and, as obvious reasons can attest to, he needed an heir, and the future heir, Alexander III, was born. The birth of his son was celebrated as a harbinger of future stability and potential greatness for Scotland, embedding Alexander II's reign in the annals of Scottish history as a period of significant consolidation and forward-looking governance. This strategic union and its fruitful outcome played a crucial role in shaping the trajectory of the Scottish monarchy, setting the stage for the reign of Alexander III, who would come to inherit not just a kingdom, but a legacy strengthened internationally with alliances and internal stability. With the birth of Alexander III in 1241, the Scottish monarchy looked forward to a future that promised continuity and stability. From his infancy, the young prince was burdened with expectations of a nation and the legacy of his father's ambitions. As the sole heir to the throne, Alexander III was expected to continue the lineage of the House of Dunkeld, ensuring the survival and sovereignty of the Scottish monarchy. Given the efforts of his father, Alexander II, to consolidate power and authority across Scotland, particularly in regions like Argyll, Galloway and the Isles, there was a clear expectation for Alexander III would continue these policies, maintaining centralising power and diminishing the influence of local Gaelic chieftains. With the strategic marriage of his parents forging alliances with powerful families and realms, Alexander III was also expected to maintain and strengthen these international relationships, which are vital for Scotland's political stability and economic prosperity. Alexander III would have been given a robust education designed to prepare him for demands of ruling a medieval kingdom. Alexander II made sure that this was taken at the utmost of importance. Alexander II's hopes for the monarch's future was likely focused on several key areas. It was the stability and security of his kingdom, the further expansion of territory and influence, and the legacy of his strong leadership. In preparing Alexander III for kingship, Alexander II was moulding a ruler he would hope would embody the ideals of medieval kingship: bravery, justice, piety and wisdom. These preparations were not just about securing a throne, but about ensuring the future of Scotland under Alexander III would be as prosperous and secure as possible. But we're going to leave Alexander II there. We will conclude today's journey through the reign of Alexander II, where he finds himself at the pivotal moment in Scottish history, with a new wife Marie and the birth of his son, the future King Alexander III. The stage is set for a continued legacy of leadership and ambition in Scotland. As we explore today, Alexander II's reign was marked by strategic marriages, consolidation of power, and a relentless pursuit to extend Scottish sovereignty. Next week, we will delve deeper into the later years of Alexander II's life. We'll uncover how his strategies and reforms paved the way for his son's future rule, and how it set the stage for the upcoming conflicts with the future Edward I of England, a period teeming with intrigue and conflict that shaped the course of Scottish history. As we edge closer to these monumental wars for Scottish independence, the excitement is palpable and the stakes could not be higher. Remember, our podcasts are released weekly with 3 episodes a month to keep you engaged with Scotland's rich and tumultuous history. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the History of Scotland. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at the History of SE1. That is at the History of SE1, or like our Facebook page at the History of Scotland podcast to stay updated on all of our latest releases and behind the scenes content. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave a review on your favourite podcasting platform. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but helps us find others to discover this podcast. You can find us as always on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and many other great podcasting sites. But until next week, guys, thank you for joining me today, and I hope you've gained some new insights into Alexander II's reign and the pivotal role it played in shaping Scotland. So, have a fantastic week ahead, and I'll look forward to exploring more historical narratives with you. Stay safe, and goodbye for now. Peace.